welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today, after a couple of announcements, I will be introducing our roundtable, which will consist of a nuclear physicist who will be reaching up at Hamilton College, and a couple of people who are very involved in both the hydro-fracking and the Spectra Pipeline movement, which is gaining momentum, and it is about to change the way things are moving in political and economic realms in the area of New York City. This is good news, but it's going to require a lot of education among all of you, all of our PRN listeners, and the New York public at large, and you'll be responsible for doing that after we do today's show. So, first of all, I just want to say that we are on every Monday at 6 p.m. on Progressive Radio Network, A Better World, so make sure that you continue to listen, and I always appreciate those of you who return every single week to listen in and hear our show, and many of you respond to our calls to action, and they're not every week, but when they are, they're always really very vitally important, and I totally appreciate your responsiveness to these very important issues that both myself, a number of the other hosts, and especially Gary Null himself are bringing to the airwaves, because it's really only through a collective education, a progressive education that we do not get on commercial media, but through such vehicles as PRN, and our willingness to take action like we're seeing at this point all over the world through, I should say, initiated by, in recent history, the Occupy Wall Street movement, which is now in over 1,000 cities worldwide. It's fascinating to watch what's going on. And of course, there's always been a revolutionary thrust going on across the world at different points in history. This is by no means the first even of this magnitude, but it is a very important one and very much of the times. And what we're going to be talking about today is part and parcel of a new awareness and education that is really long overdue, that involves our continued involvement, what I call participatory democracy, that really allows us to enter the stream of what is truly our constitutional rights, and even more than rights, I'd say our human obligation. And for those of you who pay any attention to what we do on our website and what I write at the Huffington Post, I talk a lot about this notion of sacred stewardship, which has really very much to do with a deeper and very respectful relationship to Earth, to all sentient life, and to life itself. So it's in that light that I really engage you all to pay attention to the words and the knowledge that our roundtable tonight on fracking and on the Spectra Pipeline, which is I keep referring to as a specter that we can really and need to deal with really soon, that this might inspire you to some action to either come to the public hearing this October 20th, Thursday evening, if you're in New York or can get to New York, or at least even through email or by faxing or phone calling. So with that said, an announcement or two. First of all, on PRN itself, I'll be one of the first, if not the first, to announce that it has a new website, and that is www.prn.fm. So you can now come to prn.fm and expand your political and social and nutritional education and awareness. That's number one. And the other is, on a lighter note, that at the New Life Expo, I'll be speaking this coming Saturday, and as will many, many wonderful teachers about all sorts of things, all the way from yoga to tantric sex, and there are some political and environmental speakers there as well, but a lot about health and nutrition and well-being. And if you haven't been there before, It's a good thing to do. It's at the New Yorker Hotel, 34th and 8th Avenue. Starts on Friday. Mark Becker, my dear friend, is the gentleman who runs it and has been running it for, my gosh, I think at this point almost 20 years. So the New York New Life Expo is something not to miss. And you'll really want that refresher after and celebration after we get our way Thursday night at the public hearing. On that note, welcome, my friends, to tonight's roundtable. It's good to have you. We will be speaking with a few very interesting people this evening, and let me give you a little information on them right now. First of all, we'll be speaking with Mr. James Ring, Professor Emeritus of Nuclear Physics at Hamilton College, the Winslow Professor, and he is well-published and highly knowledgeable about the role of radioactivity in the fracking process. And he's been specifically studying the Marcellus Shale and the effects of radiation issuing from that shale from the fracturing process. Now, many of you have heard me on the air and have heard our other roundtables about hydro-fracking, which is this rather dangerous process of breaking through shale in order to access natural gas. Natural gas is not a real renewable energy, and up to the point of fracturing rock in this way it wasn't exactly benign, but it wasn't the most awful thing either. But at this point in time, with the upper layers of gas now being used, this process of taking literally hundreds of chemicals, if not more, and wetting them with millions of gallons of water and with high pressure, breaking through the shale in order to release gas is a frackingly bad idea, as we say. And it would contaminate the water in such a way that it's really not reversible. Despite some rhetoric on the other side, it's just not doable. And not only is it contaminated with chemicals in some kind of hybrid compounds that we know very little about and its implications for human health and public safety, it doesn't look good no matter what. But Dr. Ring will be speaking with us about the presence of radon in it, which means the radioactive factor, and it just cannot be denied, although it is omitted, and we need to learn about that. Additional to Dr. James Ring is also Owen Crowley, who's the co-founder of Sane Energy Project.org and is a director of United for Action, which organizes for sustainable energy and a healthy future, and is also very active in the struggle against hydro-fracking. He's also, as I said, one of the founders of the Sane Energy Project and has been working very vehemently and actively in opposition to the Spectra Pipeline, which has been proposed, and that's going to be the major thrust, actually, of today's show, talking about this upcoming proposed pipeline from New Jersey. I think it's Bayonne, is that correct?
Linden, it originates.
Linden to our own historically wonderful West Village on West 14th Street. And you'll learn a lot about it. And we also have Clare Donahue, who is a spokesperson and activist with SaneEnergyProject.org. And if you don't know that website, do go, even during this show, www.saneenergyproject.org, because it is just replete with information about the Spectra Energy Pipeline. It's very, very important and really very disturbing information. It's not that I want to disturb you. It's just all very disturbing when you think that this whole project is being taken seriously by other fellow adults who have some power to influence the body politic. Now, last comment is that City Councilman James Gennaro was going to be joining us tonight, and at the very last minute had to bow out. It was a matter that he had no control of, and it was with regret that he said he wouldn't be able to join us in studio. But there will be another time when we will have him on to discuss these very important subjects. So, welcome everybody, and Dr. Rigno, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, I'm glad to be with you.
Excellent. So first of all, if you would just kind of recount for us a little bit about hydro-fracking, what it is, and why you think that even though big business and the natural gas industry is all hot about furthering it in New York State, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and elsewhere across the country, you think it's a bad idea.
Okay, well, I think you've already said something about hydro-fracking.
I hinted.
And yeah, so I will quickly pass over the elements. As you said, the idea is to drill down to this shale bed. In this case, the Marcellus is the one that most people were talking about.
And that location is what, Dr. Ring?
The Marcellus Shale extends all the way from West Virginia up to roughly in New York State, the line of the Erie Canal. So southern New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, a small part of New Jersey. It's really quite a big territory. But they drill down, and then they've got this new technology that allows them to drill horizontally from that same well pad, and they drill horizontally along the shale bed, and then they subject this to this treatment with these chemicals, many of them toxic, and a good deal of water, millions of gallons of water for each one of these drill sites. And then under pressure, they pump up the pressure. What happens is that the few natural fractures in the shale bed are widened and more new fractures are created. Then what has to happen is, and I should have said, and will now, that included in this fluid is sand. And the reason for the sand being there is that when they withdraw, which they do, pump out what I'm going to call wastewater from this fracking process, it leaves the sand behind to prop open the fractures that have been opened up in the shale. Otherwise, the shale is a very tight rock formation. Now, the reason for opening up those and keeping open those fractures is to allow the release of the natural gas, which is there. And it does that okay. In some cases, a big amount of natural gas is released. But the trouble is that this shale, from tests that have been done by the DEC, for example, in New York State,
the Department of Environmental Conservation.
Yes, exactly. Show that the wastewater has very high, from the Marcellus wastewater, has very high concentrations of radium-226. And you want to keep that isotope, that name in mind, because it's going to turn out to be important. The radium-226 gets into the wastewater because it is in the shale, and some of it's in solid form in the shale. Some of it gets dissolved in the water and then brought to the surface, and they test it there, and it's very, very hot, as we say. And what that implies, obviously, is that there's a lot of radium-226 down in the shale. Now, the problem with radium-226 is that it's itself radioactive. It decays. And that's bad, as we'll perhaps talk about later.
So you're saying that's nothing you'd want to feed your children?
That's right, exactly. In fact, this gets to a point which you kind of alluded to earlier. What are we going to do with these millions of gallons of wastewater that are pumped out? They have to be pumped out in order to release the natural gas. Well, the assumption seems to have been made that it can be treated in water treatment plants, which are available.
Are you aware of any treatment plants that remove radioactive
No, that's exactly
elements?
the point.
Oh.
That's exactly the point.
Reverse osmosis won't do it, Jim?
No, none of those techniques.
Any other sophisticated technology to remove it?
Well, there is a possibility, since radium is chemically like calcium, there is a possibility that you could use zeolite. The way you soften water is by exchanging ions, and you exchange sodium ions for calcium ions. But the problem with that is, and I'm quite sure you could do that with radium-226 too, but the problem with that would be that you've got, if you know how water softener works, you backwash it in order to put the sodium ions into the zeolite, so they're there to exchange with the calcium ions, and the calcium ions don't get into the water you use in your house.
So when it comes full circle, when you've got radium-226 in the water, because it's already in the fractured gas,
right,
and then to come full circle into the proposed pipeline from Linden, New Jersey into West 14th Street, Manhattan, New York City.
Right.
What have you got? And what's the problem?
This is the point. These tests show that there's a lot of radium-226 in the Marcellus. Radium-226, as I said, is radioactive. We already said that's bad in itself. But its descendant, its product in the radioactive decay is radon. And radon is naturally gas, not a solid. So it's going to be there because the radium-226 is there, always decaying into radon. So you got radon gas locked into the shale until you do this fracturing process, and the radon is going to be released as well as the natural gas. So there's the problem, because you're going to have a mix of radon and natural gas.
What's the relationship between radon and human health?
Radon is known to be, and I say this advisedly, and I'm not really hyping it up, is known to be a very potent cause of lung cancer. It's breathed in, it's a gas, it gets into the air, it gets into the lungs, and it decays. It's radioactive itself in the lungs, and the tissue of the lungs are affected by those radioactive decays, and they're destroyed and changed in such a way that it brings on cancer. This is a well-established fact. Next to smoking, radon is the most potent cause of lung cancer, I guess, in the world, certainly in this country.
So I guess if people live in small apartments with even smaller kitchens in the middle of New York City, and they don't have a window in their kitchen or what have you, and they're warming up or boiling some water or cooking dinner, God forbid, they're going to be subject then to radon coming out from the fracked natural gas into their stove.
They turn on the gas burns, heats the water, whatever.
Right.
But the radon is a gas that's not flammable. So it's simply going to go into the atmosphere. It's not going to change chemically, and it's going to be there to do its dirty work.
Yes,
indeed. I mean, people are going to breathe it in, and this is going to be bad, very bad for health.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Ring. I appreciate it. Why don't you stay on the line as we open up the roundtable to our other guests so we can, vary our input into this situation that doesn't sound very friendly. So,
it's not.
Yes.
Okay.
Just one small question to the professor.
Yeah, sure.
So radon is a noble gas, which means that...
This is Owen Crowley, who I introduced earlier.
Right.
Yeah, so I took a peek at the periodic table before coming here, so it's been a while for me.
Good thing to do.
Radon's only one of many interesting products, but I guess this one is the one that gets around the most because it's a gas. And it must be very heavy.
Well, it is heavy. I mean, it's 222 in terms of nucleons in its nucleus, and it's heavier than, let's say, nitrogen.
So it sits in the air. Is that the suggestion?
Well, it probably settles in an unventilated space, right?
Yes.
So if you have rugrats who are...
But let me just say something about that.
Right.
If it's in a gas line, it's what we call entrained. That whole gas, the mixture, is being pumped along.
Interesting.
There are compressors periodically along the pipeline, and the compressors are there to keep the gas moving.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to move along the radon too.
Well, yeah, and
we're talking about what happens when it hits somebody's apartment.
Right. So I'm thinking that for parents with small children, this is a double concern because, first of all, the small children have developing bodies, developing lungs. Their cells are dividing more rapidly, and they happen to be down low, which I imagine is where the stuff would settle, especially in the winter months when the windows are closed.
Because it's heavy.
There's something called sedimentation equilibrium, which is just a fancy name for what you're talking about.
Yes, indeed.
The heavier gas is going to be lower in the space.
Physically lower.
Which is why cellars out in gas country are also a hazard, because if you don't have a actively ventilated cellar, you're at a high risk of I think being affected by the radon.
I guess that's another advantage of being taller, too. I never thought of that.
Well, as long as you don't go prone, or lie down. But actually,
right.
This is a problem that we have around here, too. Because, in fact, I did some measurements at Princeton University back in the 80s, it was, and we found cellars right there in Princeton, which had very high radium concentrations, higher than the EPA limit. They set a limit which they regard as being a safe limit. So, but it's very spotty.
Yes,
you go
exactly.
from one house to another house, and they may only be, blocks apart, but the radon concentration varies considerably.
Exactly.
It has a lot to do with the underlying rock. It has a lot to do with the soil.
Of course.
And so forth.
Clare Donahue, you have been a leading spokesperson for Sane Energy Project, and you've been speaking out considerably about the Spectra Pipeline, as well, of course, as fracking, because the two are very integrated. What is motivating you to do this? What are you all so upset about?
Well, I don't live in the West Village. I live very far away from the West Village, but I found out about this pipeline completely by accident. And that alone is cause for concern, because if I had not found out about it by accident, we might not be sitting here today talking about it.
So it was a good accident.
It was a good accident, but that also points up one of the problems with our system here, our democratic system, that projects like this can happen out of public view.
Excellent point.
We're out, literally out on the streets of the West Village trying to alert people to this, and often their first question is, why haven't I heard about this? Thank God people like you are putting it out there, but a project of this size that's going to affect so many people so directly in the West Village, not a single person who lives in the West Village received a letter, telling them about this project. The public hearing, the first public hearing that it was discussed was at a community board meeting. There were possibly 40 people there, and I happened to be one of those people, and I was there completely by accident. So, that's a concern. There's an immediate concern for the...
So there's something significantly lacking in the democratic
right.
so-called process itself of government on all levels,
right.
any level, informing its constituency about plans that are afoot that could so seriously
right.
affect our health and public safety.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
it's a very good point.
So there's that's just informing people about
Yeah.
it, and then in terms of reviewing this process.
And if it were a good thing, people could at least celebrate.
Right.
Do I know, honestly, if there's a good thing to come through government, which is just so rare, but if it were to happen, we have every right to be able to celebrate it. I'm not being silly.
No,
I'm being honest.
It's true. I mean,
Yeah.
it might be cumbersome to ask permission of communities to do a large-scale infrastructure project like this, but should be a system where a community can have greater input to what's happening to them, and this is an issue with pipelines in New York City, globally, and in our country, because they tend to just be imposed on populations, and the agency that's in charge of reviewing these is a federal agency. It doesn't really have to answer to anyone. We are having this hearing on Thursday night so that people can add their comments, and we're hoping for a large turnout. We're hoping for, a lot of comments from the residents, but it's basically at their whim whether they listen to us or not.
Let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
I would like you, if you would please, Claire, to detail what this pipeline is really all about. We've been making reference to it here, allusions,
Sure.
but we haven't really spelled out what it is and what you're suggesting its dangers are.
Right.
I've done shows on this before, so those audience members know that, but I'm playing dumb.
Well, so this pipeline is technically known as the New Jersey-New York Expansion Project, and that's because it extends an existing network of pipelines north into New York City. So it starts in Linden, and it goes through our port of Bayonne. It goes directly under Jersey City. It basically follows the path of the New Jersey Turnpike through Liberty State Park, and it turns under the Hudson River about where the Hoboken Path Station is. So hitting a lot of high-density areas. Also goes through areas where there are a lot of chemical plants. And then
Elizabeth?
In all that industrial area, goes through Staten Island, very much affects people in Staten Island. And then it crosses the Hudson River and enters Manhattan at Gansevoort Street, and it changes size as it travels. In some places it's 42 inches in diameter. When it enters New York, it's 30 inches in diameter. So that's about the size of a cafe table. And even at the lower pressure that it's supposed to come in now, it can actually operate at a much higher pressure, but it's moving at the speed of a fire hose, this gas. So, it's very powerful. And where it enters Manhattan, the sanitation pier that it enters on, the next pier over is a playground. So, you said before, how could this be happening? Why would adults agree to this? It really does have that quality.
Yes, exactly. We'll go back to that idea. Let's talk about some of the points that are in your wonderful brochure that talk about such things as the fact that this particular pipe that they use for this proposed corrodes in water. I mean, how
Right.
could that be.
I know, it doesn't make sense that
No.
it's standard procedure to make this size pipe out of steel. Steel, of course, corrodes with moisture, and here's a pipe that's going under the Hudson River.
But how about stainless steel? I mean, this is like so basic that I couldn't imagine that the EPA or other regulatory bodies wouldn't be weighing in very heavily on specifying what material could and could not be used.
This is the standard material for a pipe of this size. It's the same material that the pipe in San Bruno, which exploded last September,
San Bruno,
was made out of.
California.
And what's interesting is, again, this is standard operating procedure. So it's a given that a steel pipe is going to corrode. When it corrodes, instead of replacing that section of pipe, they call it derating the pipeline. They just lower the pressure. So, because obviously it's disruptive and loses money if you have to stop the pipe in order to remove a section and replace it. So they just leave it in the ground while it corrodes and lower the pressure. The pipe that exploded in San Bruno was already operating at lowered pressure when it exploded. So it's not very reassuring. The Con Ed spokesperson who was at the Spectra hearing last October, I asked him after the meeting, okay, so this is steel. I do construction. I understand that it, corrodes. How long is this pipe going to last? And he said, 50 years. That didn't reassure me at all. 50 years goes really fast, So that's one of the big issues. They, of course, in their environmental impact statement, they feel that they've addressed all the safety issues, that they have methods for inspecting the inside of the pipes. One of the standard methods of inspecting a pipeline is to walk the path of the pipeline and look for dead grass. That's how they know a pipe is leaking. That is the main method of detecting a leak. Except here we have a pipeline that goes through a lot of urban areas that are cemented over, under a river.
Do they walk on water to do this too?
Right. So
maybe a little bit of vibration as cars and trucks go by, and
subways.
And I remember, New York Airport, that time when the backhoe managed to swipe through both the primary and backup electrical cables and take down the power on the so they may put little thingies here, then thingies disappear, and someone comes along and builds and forget to check.
Right.
These kinds of things can happen.
If you think that this has to last
area.
for so long,
Exactly.
People will move away. They'll forget that it's there.
Exactly.
They'll build.
Let's let everybody know that you are listening to Progressive Radio Network, A Better World with Mitchell J. Rabin. Our website is www.abetterworld.net. Go there and become part of our larger family. And we're dealing with calls to action such as we're discussing today and other related important subjects, Indian nuclear plant, Indian Point, etc., and others. Today we have convened a roundtable on the subject of hydro-fracking and the Spectra Pipeline, and we are speaking with Dr. James Ring, nuclear physicist from Hamilton College, Clare Donahue, activist here in New York, one of the spokespeople for Sane Energy Project, and Owen Crowley, who is one of the co-founders of Sane Energy Project and is also very actively opposing this Spectra Pipeline. Now, Spectra Energy, Owen, would you speak a little bit about that, this company and its track record? I don't know if I would want to hire them to put in a pipeline for me, based on what I've seen. I mean, do you have other data?
No, I mean, I think that some of the things that have been pinged on have been environmental violations, as I recall, in some of the subsidiaries that they have. But, I think that if you think about it, the bottom line here is, there's what the Spectra, operating through its subsidiaries, what it's representing as the justification for this project. And does that make sense? Is one really?
And what is that justification?
The justification of the project is, we want to bring more diverse sources of quote unquote clean burning natural gas to the good people of downstate New York, blah, 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 blah. Right. So you have to buy that natural gas is clean burning, and granted it's maybe cleaner when it burns than some other things, but they do state in their application that one of those diverse sources they want to hook up to is the Marcellus Shale region. So they're upfront about that. And if you think about it, so Spectra and company, these are publicly held companies, and And their mission, what is their mission in life? Is their mission in life to bring great quantities of cheap and clean-burning natural gas to the people of New York State? Or is their mission in life to sell to the highest bidder? So here it is, when gas prices...
to make money.
Right, exactly. So gas prices in this country are kind of at a low point, and yet there's this huge drill baby drill initiative. Why do you have that? Why do you need these pipelines? Well, if you look globally, there's a tremendous increasing demand for gas. You have the hungry emerging economies like India and China, and you have some countries that have very little in the way of their own domestic supplies and
how would they get natural gas from New York and New Jersey to India and China?
Well,
another pipeline?
You don't find that in the application, nor do you find that directly in the filings of the very few companies. There's one individual that I saw filed in favor of this thing in terms of initial opinion, and about 23 or 24 kind of gas-interested companies. But there have been instances elsewhere in the country where liquid natural gas import facilities have been repurposed for export. And in fact, one company called Liberty is wanting to build a liquid natural gas facility near Bayonne. Now, why would the people that promote shale gas are saying, America is the new Saudi Arabia of natural gas. Well, if you're the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, do you build import facilities? Right? Do you invest in import facilities? Do you invest in pipelines to bring even more of the stuff into your population centers?
So you're saying that there's a lot of deception going on at the same time. I heard actually that there is not even a market for this volume of gas that would be coming, even if it were fracked and pipelined into the West Village. Even so, only 20% of it is actually sold. And on the level of clean energy, while gas may burn cleaner on that level of efficiency, that's a good, but the entire life cycle of production actually makes it more dirty than coal itself, which it's seeking, of course, on paper to replace. So, in other words, it's just, a rat chasing its own tail yet again, and it's just so important. But I'd like to come back to Claire, if you would, just further elucidate why you think people should be up in arms about this matter, because as you properly said, we are facing one more public hearing, which is this Thursday in the West Village. Do you have the exact address?
Yes, it's at 7 o'clock. It starts at 7 o'clock at PS 41, which is on 11th Street between 6th and 7th Avenue in the West Village.
Finally, we'll get an education.
Yeah. Here's the big picture of this pipeline.
What's the picture? What's the real deal here?
There's the immediate danger of it exploding in the West Village, and if you go to our website, saneenergyproject.org, you'll see some maps, and the potential fire radius, should this pipeline explode, would basically take out the historic West Village. And that is a very serious concern. That the pipeline is emptying into a storage vault about a block away from the High Line. It says High Line is this incredibly successful project that has brought billions of dollars into the economy. Given
tourism,
given the recession, the West Village is a very vital economic area that could be taken out. So the area it would take out would be.
It also affects the Greenway too,
the Greenway,
which people
the West Side Highway,
along the West Side Highway. Sure.
And
all the
kinds
housing
of landmarked
there
buildings,
around,
churches, schools,
thereabouts,
playgrounds. The area that it would take out would be much, much larger than the Trade Center area that was taken out. If you can just imagine the result in the whole city just from that, from one explosion. But beyond the immediate concern is the regional concern, because, as you said, this pipeline is going to bring Marcellus gas. So that's going to increase the demand to be fracking in Pennsylvania, in upstate New York if they get permission to do so. And where the gas is drilled, all of this methane is being burned off into the air. There's off-gassing at the drill head. There's off-gassing at the compressor stations along the route. The pipeline itself, all pipelines leak. All pipelines off-gas. And the emissions that are given off at a drill site can travel in a radius of 200 miles. Well, a lot of these wellheads are less than 60 miles from New York City. So if the
Plus,
state...
there's Indian Point nuclear plant, 19
right, on the
miles
other
from
end of the
Manhattan.
city. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if
I think
this-
they're trying to kill us.
well, here's the thing. The city's stated reason for converting the city to gas, the city would like to convert all of the boilers and all the buses and all the power plants to methane.
When you say the city, who is the city?
This is part of the Plan NYC, which is a plan for a sustainable New York that is headed by Mayor Bloomberg and his Office of Sustainability. And it has some very good things about it. There's some very positive things in that plan, and bike lanes are one of them that people seem to love or hate. Here's our logic. Well, we'll save 3,000 asthma deaths a year if we convert the whole city to gas. Woohoo! But if you take their logic down the line and we end up having more fracking going on within a 200-mile radius of it, and we end up with, as Owen said, an LNG export terminal in Bayonne, our air quality on those two counts alone is going to be so much worse. Then, if you have radon coming into your kitchen stove, you're going to replace asthma with lung cancer. So how is this good for us? So those are just the two basic concerns, and then you go into the safety record,
of Spectra Energy.
They just in June were cited for 17 violations. In June. Right. They've been responsible for, a lot of people are familiar with the Steckman Ridge compressor explosion that coated acres and acres of, pure farmland with toxic oil.
Which was where?
Steckman Ridge, Pennsylvania. That was their compressor station. That's an accident that is still not resolved, more than 2 years later. So,
in 1994, and you make reference to this here in some of your material, there was the explosion in Edison, New Jersey.
I remember that.
And good friends of mine were affected by that. They lived literally right there.
Wow.
They had to flee. They were endangered. They were running around, in the middle of the night. I mean, it was awful. And I heard first, hand accounts of what it was like. It wasn't theoretical.
Right.
It was like close friends of mine who went through this, and it was traumatic, emotionally, physically endangering. And how do you explain to people what we see here, based on what Dr. Ring is sharing with us regarding the increase of lung cancer, the literal threat. So now what that will cost us in healthcare in the city, in the overpopulated hospitals already, and the lack of dollars.
And this is a neighborhood without a hospital, by the way. The West
St.
Village
Vincent's has
is
been
missing a
closed,
hospital.
exactly.
So.
I think it's a mistake to just think that this is somehow a West Village issue.
No,
it is
not.
just far from it. This is, it is local there. It is New Jersey, which is another locality. It's the rest of Manhattan. It's all the five boroughs.
with
And
the
it goes, and it allows for, it gives the nod to this whole idea of hydro-fracking, both locally and systemically across the country.
Right.
So, I mean, Owen, what do you have to say about this?
Well, this is why we call ourselves the Sane Energy Project.
Thank you.
We're in favor of energy that doesn't incinerate us, doesn't irradiate us, and it turns out that there are alternatives that exist today. But because our country is so, it's like these people who are demonstrating downtown, our country is so beholden to corporations, our politicians are so, their compasses tend to point towards the money that corporations have and the influence that corporations have. And to be fair, they are human beings and they make policy, they seek expert advice. Who's paying the experts, right? The well-established fossil fuel industry. So it's a tough momentum, but it's the momentum in the wrong direction. Just because you're got a head of steam and you're picking up speed, could be that you're going down the hill towards a crash.
Exactly.
And it's time to do something intelligent. Exactly. And other countries are pulling ahead of us on this.
Yes.
So we're also falling behind technologically. This is a 19th and 20th century technology.
Exactly. I'm very glad you made that point. I would just say, I just this morning I happened to have heard another gathering on MNN, the People's TV, and I heard Mark Ruffalo speak. He was part of the group, and I thought he was really very eloquent on the subject of moving toward green technologies, and that if you really want to look at the global picture and economic picture, this is the thing that really blows me away. That the economic picture is everything, talking about momentum, is moving toward renewable and sustainable energies. So from that larger perspective, this is like an addiction to, it's like a little mouse who knows one little rut and it keeps going there looking for cheese. But there's an entire, huge, beautiful, well-populated and treed labyrinth that he's missing out on because he keeps doing that one little thing. And the fact is that, as you well said, that we are falling behind economically and ecologically because we're not getting on the green bandwagon. And this is just another thing that continues to bring us back to the 19th century.
It also points to a profound lack of imagination and leadership, in my opinion.
Very true.
In this time, if you think about it, during the second President Roosevelt, the New Deal, the GW Bridge that I drove across today, built in the 30s. Whether you like Hoover Dam or not, there are a lot of big public works projects that employed a lot of people and put a lot of infrastructure in place that had paid a lot of dividends for the decades that followed. So why isn't it, in this economic times, why don't we have a new deal for sustainable energy?
Exactly.
There's all the people that, so you see this thing about the XL pipeline out west, and everybody, just like here, everybody's against it, except for a very few people who get a temporary job out of it. I think, fine, if you're a pipe fitter or a carpenter or a metal worker, you get 6 to 9 months of work, maybe 2 years on the outside on a project like that. But if these same pipe fitters, metal workers, and carpenters were to start retrofitting buildings around the city, it'd be more efficient.
There you go.
Right, and we're starting to build, build infrastructure for transmitting, the energy, the wind energy out west that's going begging to the urban regions that have nothing to do right now because their infrastructure is totally fossil fuel based. These types of investments would pay dividends into the future and position us in a leadership position rather than going down,
right, toward inferno. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just so true. Van Jones, one of the few things I appreciated of Obama is when he brought on Van Jones, who got, chased out too quickly. But, he had the whole green collar project, and I thought it was just brilliant. And this man has his feet on the ground, and he knows what he's talking about, and he outlined a major plan that would shift our country into that direction. Mm-hmm. We're running out of time a bit. Dr. Ring, I'd like to just touch base with you one more time. What is the most important point that you would like to make to our listening audience?
Yeah, I'm a nuclear physicist, and this whole question about radon is the thing that really is close to my heart, so to speak. Yes. I hope it's not close to my lungs. But anyway, the point is that we're not testing for radon, and we ought to be. Yes. Along this pipeline, the Spectra Pipeline, there are compressor stations. There's a problem there because they use the gas that's in the pipe to run the compressors. The compressors then exhaust to the atmosphere right there, and we could test radon down the pipe. We should do that. We should test radon in the exhaust from the compressors. We should be testing radon in these kitchens in the West Village. Radon testing should be a kind of universal. It is readily available, and it should be done as a matter of course.
I agree with you completely.
And then we'd have real scientific measurements to really show how serious this problem is. Well, it's serious already, but we know.
even without
Sure.
that, but that just further puts another nail, as they say, into the coffin.
That's it.
Yes,
That's it.
exactly. Dr. Ring, I want to thank you so much, Professor Emeritus, Nuclear Physics at Hamilton College. Appreciate
Well,
it.
thank you.
Absolutely. And Clare Donahue, would you just speak again and give us a kind of a quick synopsis of the seriousness of the situation, the terror of the situation, as Mr. George Gurdjieff used to say, and what we can do about it?
I think we've covered the terrifying part pretty well. What we can do about it is, first of all, come to the meeting on Thursday. If we're going to make a case to FERC that the city doesn't want this project, people need to
FERC
show
is the Federal Energy Regulatory
Right.
Commission.
This is their
We
hearing.
tend to speak in lingo,
I know,
so
I
it
forget.
must be
I'm
said
sorry.
to people.
Good.
Right.
So come out to the hearing because we need to show a presence of opposition. They're not going to believe that the city is against it unless people actually show up. If you can't come to the meeting, on our website we have a sample comment letter. You can sign it and mail it in, or you can write your own comment letter. It's very important to get large numbers of people sending comments to FERC in opposition, because these numbers we will need to use the numbers of opposition should FERC decide to approve the pipeline. That will be necessary to use as evidence in the
counter.
lawsuit. Right.
Exactly. Wonderful.
Right.
Thank you for your good work as well. So appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Mitchell.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Owen, we have 1 30-second slot.
If people are getting out their pencils, the one thing to write down is saneenergyproject.org.
Yes.
All the information is there. It's an excellent
True.
website. It's very actively maintained, and it's all the truth, and it's links to other sources of the truth. We need to have truth to power here. We need to keep making this point and reinforcing the point.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you both and Dr. Ring for being part of our roundtable today and making these points. Absolutely. I think it's very clear, abundantly clear, what we're dealing with. And 2 major points were made. We're dealing first with an issue having to do with a threat to public health and safety. And we're also looking at a true failure of democratic process. Both of these are equally important, but they're both very important. And we have to really scrutinize them both and do what we can as a collective to call our politicians on the carpet about this, and our federal government, because they are now routinely leaving us out of very important decisions which are directly affecting our lives. So I can't tell you how happy I am that the Occupy Wall Street movement is occurring. It's generic in nature, and on our show we do what we can to specify the issues so the call to action can be clear and people can put one foot in front of the other to take back our government, to take back our property and our homes, and in short, our lives. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Come to visit us at our website at www.abetterworld.net. Join the newsletter, become part of the community, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.